Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Sagacity. Today I have with me Chiamaka Okeke. She has a PhD from Rhodes University in South Africa, and her research focused on bioinformatics. Chiamaka, welcome to Sagacity. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Madara?
I'm good, thank you. So without further ado, let's jump right into what your PhD was on. Tell us a little bit about what the focus was and what the purpose of your research was.
My PhD is on mutation analysis and drug design. And so my PhD is focused on the understanding mutation analysis in malaria studies. And so mutation is changes in the genetic material of an organism. And in my case, it is Plasmodium falciparum, which is one of the causative agents of malaria. So my research is understanding the mechanism of resistance in a specific region of the Plasmodium parasite genome and the association with these mutations to antimalarial drug resistance.
Okay, very interesting. Tell us a little bit about what the contribution of your research would be to the society at large. What is the importance of it? Why should people care about your research topic?
So we know malaria is a disease of global health importance, and we know that the malaria mitigation and elimination efforts relies heavily on the use of anti-malaria drugs. However, these efforts are threatened by anti-malaria resistance. And so over the years, we've seen a progression in the use of anti-malaria drugs such as quinine, chloroquine, and currently artemisinin-based combination therapy, which is currently the first line recommended drug. So what we see is that during the onset of malaria, scientists developed anti-malaria drugs to eliminate the parasites, and then that these drugs would work, and then the parasite develops resistance to the drug, and then scientists would develop another drug and the parasites would develop resistance. And that's how the progression has been. And so my research just shines a little light on the resistant mechanism of the parasite. So instead of just moving on to another drug target, how about we understand what is currently happening and why the parasite is developing resistance to these drugs that were once, effective. And so that's the contribution of my research to malaria studies, and it just opens like a pathway to drug resistance. And so when we try to understand this resistance, we can apply the knowledge in the development of new anti-malaria drugs that will be able to withstand future resistance.
Okay. And how big of a problem is anti-malaria drug resistance? I know that. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is a huge problem because I was writing a review article on malaria in Africa and looking at the evolution of anti-malaria drugs. It is a big problem. I know right now we are focused on antimicrobial resistance, but anti-malaria resistance is actually it's a huge problem because right now the WHO has recommended the artemisinin-based combination therapy, and there's now been an emergence of resistance in Southeast Asia to this drug, and now this resistance has the capacity to spread to Africa, and Africa has like the highest burden of malaria. Like when we look at the numbers, Africa has like the highest. I think there are 4 countries that make up about half of these numbers, and so if the resistance to artemisinin spreads to Africa, it will be a huge problem. It's going to be a huge problem. So more research should be done in anti-malaria drug resistance studies.
Yeah, I would think that the outcome would be applicable to many tropical countries
Absolutely.
where there's a high prevalence of mosquito-related diseases. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your PhD research. You are already a PhD holder. What have you been up to since you've graduated? What are you working on right now?
So right now I have some side projects that I'm doing. Like I said, we're writing this ebook on pharmacogenomics and specifically in Africa. So we started this project during my PhD studies and I had to like take a break from it. But now that I'm done, I'm continuing on that. And I'm also starting my postdoctoral fellowship, my postdoctoral research in my current research lab. I will start that next year, but since I'm still in the lab, I'm helping some students here and there, following up. I have some research for my PhD research that is pending, and so I'm working on that and then preparing for postdoctoral research.
Okay, wonderful. Congratulations on your postdoc.
Thank you.
And I'm
Thank
excited to
you.
see what kind of work you do in the future in the
Yeah,
field. Now, tell us a little
absolutely.
bit about how you got into pursuing a PhD. What was your previous experience like before you started as a PhD student? Did you have any experience in the specific field you're focusing on right now?
No, my undergrad was in microbiology, which I really loved. And after that, because in Nigeria we have the NYSC, which is a compulsory internship where you work for the government. And so once you graduate, you go for your NYSC, which is like, as I said, like an internship. And so I was posted to a research institute in Abuja, Nigeria. In the research lab, I participated in so many things, and there was an introduction to bioinformatics course by the H3 Bionet, which is like a Pan-African initiative. So after I attended that course, and I was so intrigued by the bioinformatics word, I had never heard about bioinformatics at the time, and so I was interested in that. And then I applied for a master's in bioinformatics here, and so I have a master's in bioinformatics, and after master's, I proceeded for my PhD.
Okay. If you were to explain to our audience, who might include people from different fields, what bioinformatics is in a sentence or two, how would you describe it to people who are not too familiar with the term and the area of study?
Okay. So just bioinformatics is, so we have wet lab where you go to the lab and you do your experiments. If you're a microbiologist, you're working with organisms, you're working with petri dishes and all. So with bioinformatics, we predict analysis using computational tools. So we simulate the whatever we are working on. If you're working on an enzyme, or you're working on a gene, or you're working on a protein structure, and we see there are computational tools that we are created to mimic like the cell-like environment. So we know that once you target things in the lab, you're targeting a particular cell, you're trying to see the effect of maybe like a drug on a cell, and you're seeing it like you have this cell-like environment. So in bioinformatics is the use of computational tools to mimic biological systems.
Okay, great. Thank you for that description of bioinformatics. Let's go back to talking a little bit about your previous experience and qualifications that you had before you started the PhD. So you said you had a master's. Did you have any publications besides your bachelor's and master's degree and that internship experience, which you think might have helped you get into the PhD program?
So I think my master's experience helped get into the program. So with masters, most people have no idea about bioinformatics and like the courses. I think right now in South Africa, they are now introducing bioinformatics in like third year, and then honors. Their honors year is their like final year of undergrad or so. And so at the time, I did not have any experience. But for masters, we had my master's was coursework and thesis based. So for the first 5 months, we had like intensive coursework, and then we had like the master's research where you would, at the end of your research, you write a thesis and it goes through evaluation. So having that knowledge from masters influenced my PhD application, because now starting a PhD, I already have the basic knowledge of bioinformatics, and it will, propel me faster into my PhD studies. So I would just say the knowledge I gained from my master's that's helped during my PhD application. But I didn't have any public. I had my first publication was from my undergrad thesis. My undergrad thesis was published, and so I have that. But for PhD, I think it was the knowledge that I gained through masters that helped.
Let's talk a little bit about the process of applying to your PhD program in your university at Rhodes University. What was the process like, and what were the requirements to be admitted to the program?
So I will just talk about it in two phases, because I had started my master's in bioinformatics in my research lab. And my research lab is the research unit in bioinformatics, Ruby. So I would use Ruby a lot. So I was doing I had started my master's. It was towards the end of my master's that I expressed my interest in applying for a PhD. So the PhD, I think there's a time limit for a PhD application. So I expressed interest in applying in pursuing a PhD to my supervisor, and she said she was happy to have me in her lab as a PhD student. And then I followed up with the application. Since I was already in the university, I got the application forms, and then I submitted a proposal, and I got my acceptance letter. But for people who probably had a degree somewhere somewhere else, the basic application process is to contact a potential supervisor, communicate with them. There's usually like a series of emails and meetings expressing why you're interested in this particular field. And your potential PhD supervisor needs to accept you in their lab, and then they would put you through the university application process. And you also have to like write the proposal and communicate that proposal with your supervisor, and then eventually submit the proposal with your application.
Okay. And once you are admitted to the program, what is the structure like? What happens in the first year, the second year, and so on until you defend?
Because I had a master's in bioinformatics, my structure was from after acceptance. I think the academic year starts in February, like officially starts in February. And so for me, once I got the admission, I started my research immediately. But for students without knowledge in bioinformatics, they would join the master's class for the 5-month course so that they would learn like the basics of bioinformatics, and like learn how to code and learn how to understand the tools and the techniques that would be used for the program. So after the 5 months coursework, we would write an exam, and of course you would have to pass your exams to be so that the supervisor will be sure that you have the basic understanding and you can proceed with your research.
So this exam, is that something similar to what we call comprehensive exam or qualifying exam in other countries?
I think so. I think so, because the requirement for completing your master's degree is to get a certain grade in your coursework and then get a certain grade in your research thesis. And so it qualifies as a qualifying exam. But for PhD students, I think it's very important for them to do well in majority of the courses. And so whichever I think throughout my stay here, everyone have done so well in their coursework. So I would assume if there is a student that doesn't like maybe do so well, they would have to maybe repeat the course, or will be assigned someone to tutor them and make sure they have an understanding of the courses and what they are doing before they proceed with research.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about the funding, provision, and structure of the program?
Okay, so in South Africa, there are like funding bodies in South Africa, like the NRF, which is the National Research Foundation. So they mostly fund postgraduate students. And so you have the NRF, and then you have internal fundings, like in my case, would have Rhodes University postgraduate funding. And so once you contact a potential supervisor and express interest in applying for a PhD program, they would send you a list of all of this funding for you to apply. So you would apply for the PhD in the university and then apply for this funding. So you would apply for the Rhodes University funding, you would apply for the NRF, and there are also external bodies that funds research in South Africa, such as the OWSD, which is the organization for, I can't remember, but I think it's Organization for Women. I can't remember, but it's OWSD, and you have that, you have various fundings from the United States and all. So you can apply for that, and your supervisors can also have like their grants that can permit them to sign students under such grants.
Is it common for pretty much almost all PhD students to receive funding, or are there cases where some students pay out of pocket for their PhD program?
It is competitive, especially for international students. So especially for the South African-based funding bodies, the NRF, it is competitive because they prioritize South African citizens first, and there's a certain percentage of international students that are funded. So as an international student, it is competitive for me. And even as for South Africans, it's also competitive because there are certain criteria. For the NRF, you have to score above 65% in your previous degree. You have to, you have to have some publications, you have to attend some conferences. So your CV and your academic qualifications, your academic background, your impact to society and all qualifies you for this funding. So I don't think I know anyone who is paying out of pocket. Supervisors actually understand how stressful it is to do your PhD without funding. So they would rather you wait another year and keep applying until you get a funding. And so with that, so I know someone who applied for funding and did not get, and then had to, wait the next year to reapply. And also with that, the supervisors knows how serious you are while you're applying. If they have any grants, you will be on the priority list for that.
All right. Thank you so much for talking a little bit about your PhD program and technical things associated with the degree. Let's change the topic and talk a little bit about your personal experiences that you've had during your PhD. What are some of the challenges that you faced since you started the process of applying to a PhD and going through it up until now?
I also had challenges with funding. When I expressed interest in applying for a PhD and pursuing a PhD, my supervisor sent me like a list of, funding bodies, and I applied for them. And as a Nigerian, there's certain funding that you can't apply for. And so that limited my chances. And so I applied for scholarships and I didn't get, but I had already started my PhD. So after I completed my master's, I just continued with my PhD, and it was a bit challenging. But then my supervisor signed me under the grants, the History of Bionet, and they funded my studies, my entire PhD research. So that was quite a challenge at the beginning of my PhD studies. But I would say, because I was here for masters, I would just talk about the challenges I had. Majorly when I came for masters. So it was just like the change of country and being away from family, having to establish yourself in research and having to find your own community and just balance out life was a bit challenging at the beginning. But once I connected with people and connected with other researchers and you found a community, it went well after then.
Yeah, as an international graduate student, there's a lot of things that you have to that has to come together in order for you to feel like home. It's wonderful to hear that, everything came together at the end. A follow-up question, what made you apply as an international student to be a PhD candidate in South Africa? Why not at home?
One would be the area of expertise. By now we have bioinformatics courses in Nigeria, but at the time I was very intrigued with South Africa, the research in South Africa, and I said I attended a course which was hosted by the History of Bionet. And when I Googled the researchers and our teachers and our professors there, they were from South Africa. So I was really interested in the bioinformatics network in South Africa. And also, I'm not really sure about the funding bodies in Nigeria. I know back home, some people pay out of pocket for masters and PhD research at the time when I was applying. So I was also looking for that opportunity. But I know now there are now fundings. I see fundings that are now specific to Nigeria and also to other African countries, which is great for other upcoming researchers. But I was particularly interested in the bioinformatics network. Bioinformatics is really strong in South Africa, and now in Nigeria there are now so many research institutes that are specializing in bioinformatics and computational biology, and I look forward to working with them and all. But yeah.
Okay, great. My next question is, what are some of the challenges associated with pursuing a PhD in South Africa that you believe should be addressed to ease the lives of PhD students, if there's any?
I don't know if there's any, but South Africa also provides funding for postgraduate students, for honors, for masters and PhDs, which is great. And of course, there's always a budget for that, and they can't, fund everyone. And so I would just, I don't know if I'm reaching for the stars, asking them to fund more students and, maybe, increase the budget for more students and all. But yeah, I think, I don't know if there's any specific challenges, but for an international student, the application process is, you have to go through evaluation of your previous qualifications, especially if you studied outside of South Africa. You have to evaluate your qualifications so that they meet up to the standards here. And so sometimes that takes quite a while, and you can have an offer, you can have a PhD offer, you can have, a funding offer, and then you can't begin your program because they've not evaluated your certificates. Or also as an international student, we have visa application from back home. But the government is actually working hand in hand with that, and students are encouraged to apply for their evaluation early enough so that they meet up with the admission process. And they're also working because for visa application, once you apply from back home, the Home Affairs or the offices back in Nigeria, they have to confirm your admission here and confirm the legitimacy of your study here. And so that takes a while, but they're working on the timelines and making sure that students that are given the opportunity to study in South Africa actually make it to South Africa. So yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the positive experiences you've had so far in your graduate life, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the positive experiences will be graduation, completing the PhD. So it was an amazing experience, graduating and being celebrated by almost everyone who were there at the beginning of my journey. So that was a very positive experience. And also the friends, the community I have here, or I made here. When I came in, I really came in. I just came in like I had no idea. I just packed up my things, and I had no idea of what I would face here. But I was opportune to meet great people who were my emotional support system here in Rhodes University. So I would say meeting them has been a positive experience so far, and like the relationship we have and all. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the connections you make, especially during grad studies, if you do stick together, that's a phase in your life where you do create some everlasting connections. Yeah, it's definitely something to celebrate. So next, I want to ask you, what are some of the existing gaps in your area of research? For example, what are some topics that a student may work on in the next 3 to 5 years if they choose to complete a PhD in that specific focus area that you're working on?
And so in bioinformatics, like I've come to realize, is a broad field of study. And so I would say looking at the resistant mechanism in other drugs, and also looking at other targets in the malaria parasite life cycle, and seeing and understanding the resistance in those areas. Because while the research in malaria, there's been a progression in research in malaria, there are still things that we don't understand. There are still mechanisms of resistance that we have no idea in. And with the help of bioinformatics and the sequencing of the parasite genomes, like this knowledge is now out there. We just have to zoom into the molecular level and see how we can contribute to antimalarial drug resistance. There's a lot of untapped areas in antimalarial drug resistance that can be looked at.
The next question I have is one of the most frequently asked questions from PhD students. A lot of people wonder how you maintain a balance as a PhD student or a candidate.
Yeah, I would say I think at the beginning of my PhD, I didn't really have a specific balance, but I'm a Christian, so I am active in church. And so that is what, like, when I go to bed on Saturday evening or Saturday night, I don't think about my research. It's just, going to church and participating in church. And also, like, I used to sometimes host dinner or lunch with my friends on Sundays. So Sundays were like my free time to hang out, to be in the presence of the Lord, and also hang out with my friends and all. And I also, during the first few years of my PhD, I did some volunteering work every Saturday mornings. And so I always I arranged my timetable to always be available for that. And so some community engagement work, hanging out with friends, and I have some friends that have turned family here that, whenever things get so exhausting, I go to their home and I spend time with them, and it's just so relaxing for me. And yeah, I wanted to play sports, but right now I'm learning volleyball, but I wanted to learn during my PhD work. I just couldn't, and the time was just, I couldn't make out time. So just I think the work would always be there. It's important to take mental breaks, and I found that out. Burning out was the worst. Like you work and you work and your body breaks down, and you have to take out time to recover. So it's important to have a work-life balance. It's difficult, especially as a PhD, because sometimes you're doing your research and everything is going so well and you don't want to stop, you just want to keep going, and then it's just burnout. But yeah, spend time with family, join a sport, learn how to play something, an instrument or something, just something that can take your mind away from research for a couple of minutes or a day or so.
You touched on a very important point, Chiamaka. Burnout, it is very real. I myself felt that. I finished my undergrad and then didn't take a break, started master's.
Same.
I started PhD right away. And by the end of the first year or so, I was motivated to go forward, but I was burnt out physically, very tired. And no matter how much you push forward, there's a point where you can't go further. You need to step back and break. And
Yeah.
I think for future PhD students or anyone thinking of doing any sort of graduate studies or anything really, I think it's important to listen to your body and also your mind and take them, even though you don't want to.
Just try.
As you said, it's very important for sure. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experience with burnout and how you manage that. Let's debunk one PhD myth today. Is there something that you have in mind you want to talk about?
I think it's the popular one that, you have to be extremely intelligent to start a PhD program. But I had to learn that. I remember towards the end of my master's and realizing that I was going to be a PhD student, I was freaking out. I was so stressed about becoming a PhD student because, I thought there was a certain level of knowledge that you should have before starting a PhD program. And I remember expressing it to one of my senior colleague who I think was in his third year of PhD. And he said to me, Chiamaka, if you actually know what you're doing, you're not supposed to be here. Your PhD journey is your master's journey, your postgraduate journey is a learning curve. You're learning new things, you're learning new things, and you're learning and you're contributing to science. So you don't know what you're doing, you're learning on the way. And so that's like one myth about PhDs. Like I actually learned a lot on the job, and yeah, and I'm now confident in research. Was starting out, no.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of my other guests have also said the same thing. And I've been thinking about it, because a lot of people do mention that. I agreed without any thought with the statement that you don't have to be smart to do a PhD, even though I think there are different aspects to it, right? Whether or you have a content expertise, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to know about the topic so much before you get into the PhD program. But when we say you have to have some sort of intelligence, it's just being able to put in the work and to be persistent, to go forward and keep trusting yourself that you can do it. So if you look at it from that perspective, yeah, you do have to have that intelligence to train your mind to do something that you really want. Okay, we're coming to the end of the interview. What is one advice you would give to future and current PhD students?
To current PhD students, I would say to understand that your PhD journey is specific to you. So comparing your pace with other PhD students is going to be detrimental to you. And so PhD is an individual journey, is a marathon that you have to pursue on your own and work on your own pace and avoid comparison to other people's journeys or their PhD, and make peace with that. There are people who complete their PhDs in 3 years and 4 years and 5 years, people have different structures in their research group, and you have to just focus on your research group and focus on your research, your outcome, and the knowledge that you develop during your PhD journey, and also to find a work-life balance and avoid burnout. You don't have to break down before you actually rest, because what I realize is that when you burn out, it takes more time. Like the time you should have spent balancing your life, you spend more resting and getting your body, like after burnout and you've recovered, now you have, after physically recovering, you have to mentally recover and then be mentally ready or prepared for your research. So create a work-life balance. Like the work will be done, but you need a sane mind, and also build your community in your lab, outside your lab. It's very important. And then for future PhD students, I would say do your research before joining a lab. Do your research on a topic that you want to work in. I know during my when I was applying for my master's, I saw so many interesting topics, but I had to choose the one that was very interesting to me and all. Because you're going to do this for like maybe 3 years, which is a long time, and if you get bored easily if you're not interested in some. So do your research about your topics, your supervisor, your university, how they can cater for you. If you're an international student, speak to other international students about their experiences and all.
That is wonderful advice. I 100% agree. I don't have anything to say about that. Anything else you would like to share with our audience before we end today's episode?
Nothing. Has been great here. The PhD has really been a journey that has come to an end. I think that's why I'm so happy, because I'm done. I'm done with all the stress and the challenges and all. But I would say, well, it was really worth it. With the PhD, I'm not just living with. I did not complete the PhD with a title. I completed with a knowledge with an expertise in my field, and the knowledge, because in PhD you learn a lot of things. You have to learn about admin work, your research and communicating, and learning how to communicate in person and on email, and how to present your research to people and all, how your writing skills just comes with a lot of skills. And I'm so happy I did a PhD, and I'm so happy I'm done. If I had this interview like last year, maybe I would have a different attitude. I don't know, but you can see me smiling. It's because I've gotten to the end of the tunnel, and there were some challenges along the way, but you will, if you're currently doing your PhD, you will overcome. So yeah.
Well, congratulations once again for finishing your PhD. I also finished this year.
Congratulations.
You, and I hear you. That's the smile. It's I have seen myself smile more since the grad.
Yeah, I'm smiling more. I was shocked. But yeah.
I have to agree with what you said about the set of skills that comes with doing a PhD. It's not just research, it's everything else. How do you, prioritize things? How much time are you spending on one email versus everything else that you have to do? It's a set of skills that comes with doing graduate work, and especially a PhD. So yeah, we're happy for both of us for finishing it this year. I wish you all the very best for your future endeavors and what's planned next. Chiamaka, thank you so much for taking the time today to be here and share your story. And our audience, thank you so much for being here with us today. Chiamaka was so generous in sharing her experience and knowledge about doing a PhD in bioinformatics in South Africa. I really hope this episode brings you some knowledge that will help you or a friend that you know in the future. Once again, thank you so much for being here with us. Take care.
Bye. Bye.